We had an opportunity to visit a sixth grade classroom in Ipswich, Massachusetts. And it's a science classroom, and the teacher is teaching students to better understand the relationship of their what they drink and consume on a regular basis relative to measurement and collecting data. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to look at the lesson through the UDL lens.
So we're going to do some multiplication. In the 20-ounce soda can, how many servings are in that, the 12-ounce soda, how many servings are in the 12-ounce soda? Jeff?
One per can.
There's one serving per can. So what would our total amount be? What would our total grams per container be? We're multiplying by 1.
41.
41. Okay, so that was pretty easy math.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get more complicated. For the 20-ounce soda, what's the math going to be? What two numbers are we going to use?
27 times 2.5.
27 times 2.5. Now, for your brains not to get overstressed, I've provided you with a calculator on the table. Could you do the math for 27 times 2.5? Maddie, you have it figured out? What is it, hon?
67.5.
67.5?
Yeah.
So in a 20-ounce bottle of soda, there's 67.5 grams of sugar. That's a lot of sugar. Okay. So does everybody understand?
There are some really interesting things that I think that this teacher is doing to support her students in several ways that I'm seeing, and I just like your reactions to it.
I was struck by the use of calculators, and that thinking about what the goal of the lesson was, she wasn't really expecting them to do the mathematics, but she was actually providing, a support, a tool to help overcome that potential barrier that students might have.
Yeah, I think that was a key element here. She had her eyes clearly on the goal, and her goal is interesting because it's the question that the kids need to answer. The experimental question, being a science class, is what is my sugar consumption over the last week? And in answering this question, they're gathering data, they're organizing data through that tabular format, and it's not the mathematics that they need to do. So you can take that math piece, have a tool that's going to support you in calculating, and get at the goal of the lesson. But what I also really like is how grams are represented on paper. They have it on their table. It's on nutrition labels. It's all textually based. It's supporting the recognition network because you're representing grams of sugar in multiple formats, physical formats, as well as the numerical format. And she's bringing it down to the level of, in their house, having that container of sugar that they're spooning out onto their cereal or whatever, and relating it to their own lives. So they have a reason to engage in understanding what grams of sugar means to them, and it's an alternate representation of that sugar content. She's taking complicated mathematics and simplifying the process so it's something that they can understand how to do with their own data.
I think I was struck by that also. And that was something I even wrote down in my notes here. She verbally gives the goal or the task at hand, but then she models from what she said verbally to now this is what it looks like. And then she does use their own data, which again is very nice because it's authentic. Go ahead.
I was going to say that also I think what's good is she partially fills out her table.
Exactly.
So it's not just copying and that's her data, but a partially filled out template is a good model and will be helpful that way. What I think would be nice as the lesson extends is that some students will not need her to template ahead, and that one way to differentiate this work is to have the template be available for those students who really need it still, and for some she should move to, do you know how to set up your own data table? If you do, go ahead. So I think the next, as she moves further into these lessons, some students will continue to have the template, the support, and some will learn how to organize and make their own, and that would be a good way to UDLize, excuse the expression, this lesson.
by using the guidelines, we could see the underneath better of her planning and her really taking a lot of time to create materials and an environment that supported her students.
So richly supporting that strategic network. This is such a huge focus of this because there's lots of complicated steps, mathematics, filling out, and she is richly supporting those kids and being able to get through that task.
Right, and we often underestimate how valuable it is to provide those structures ahead, the graphic organizers, the charts, the templates, because this is way too much for students at this age. And her providing each student with one and then doing it herself is very supportive. And I think we've also talked about how a next step is to realize that the students are at different places and be able to differentiate that.
I think this is where everything is coming together, where you're seeing the engagement of working with their own data. You're seeing the alternate representation of the sugar content with the actual teaspoon and sugar. You're seeing the connection of the teaspoons with, and they're going to be weighing the sugar. So that's the connection of, oh, a gram is actually a unit of weight. It's not just something that's textual on a label. It actually, it's weight. And so it's putting the pieces together and having the kids put the pieces together themselves by providing these multiple representations of this material, which makes it more engaging and relevant to their lives.
In addition, we're seeing support from both of the educators in the classroom, which is very nice because they seem to be floating from students to students. So it's not that you get a sense that one educator is assigned to one or two students, that they really have a joint role in which they're focusing on curriculum and helping all the students achieve what they need to achieve. So that's a kind of a just-in-time support, and it's equal for all.
I think we actually probably see a little bit of each of the three guidelines under affect, in that she's using authentic things that the students know to bring science inquiry into the classroom. So she's recruiting their interests in something that makes sense to them and so on. She does a couple of things that help them sustain their effort. They're in collaborative groups, they're able to support each other, and we've seen several instances where one child's clearly helping another, and that allows them to keep going toward the goal they want. And she keeps the goals also very salient because of the way she structured the classroom. Things are up on the board. You can remember, what are we trying to do here, which is another one of the benchmarks for sustaining effort and persistence. And I think she's also building some of their self-regulation skills. That is, she is asking of them and modeling and so on to be able to complete this task, to be able to set goals for themselves.
You know, I find it interesting that we can use the UDL guidelines checklist to really help us understand in a better format how lessons actually play out and how they can align to address the needs of all learners in the classroom. So going through this is a very helpful process. And as we say, you're not going to do every single one of the benchmarks or guidelines in a given lesson. But clearly, if a teacher, when they're doing a unit of study, ensure that they're addressing many of these points, then in fact I think we can ensure that the lesson is designed to meet the needs of all learners and taking advantage of what we know about the recognition networks, what we know about the strategic networks, and what we know about the affective networks.